This episode was a full-fledged, pull out all the stops, haunted house, supernatural horror, and in my opinion may just be the best episode so far, but let me explain why. You are now listening to Opinionated Olivia, talking about whatever I want. If you like what I have to say, give me a cheeky little thumbs up and a subscription will not go amiss. Now let's get into this. Have you noticed that the opening of each episode holds the clues to what will unfold in episodes, as well as setting a tone? This episode starts in a black church and is filled with singing and dancing. However, this is juxtaposed to Leti, who's sitting as though she is at a funeral, looking very solemn. This reminds me of the start of last week's episode when we saw Atticus, aka Tick, looking like he was on edge, whereas we saw Leti and Uncle G blissfully oblivious. Leti is quite visibly still caught up by the events which unfolded with Uncle G. We could say that she is in fact the ghost at this service. She goes unnoticed, and it is though she is not there. This lends itself quite nicely to the title of the episode, called Holy Ghost. To me, this has several meanings. One is reference to the Holy Ghost, which derives from Christianity. The Holy Ghost is one of the elements from the Trinity. The other two are Father and the Son, which could mean mother and daughter. Throughout the episode, we see how Leti is haunted by her mother. The Holy Ghost is also mentioned in an essay by James Baldwin named The Price May Be Too High. As we know, Lovecraft Country has already referenced James Baldwin, and I have broken this down in my first episode review, which, if you haven't seen already, I will link below. So, while Leti is deep in her thoughts, we hear the narration of Precious Angel, which was taken from a Nike advert.
So go ahead, Leti. Fly.
Without context, this may seem a bit random. However, the advert features a trans Vogue dancer. It is there to remind us that women have always faced the impossible. However, they come out the other side. To me, this is definitely in relation to Leti. Her flight is an act of fear, not of bravery. In this episode, we see how she tries to escape from her family. However, she has no other option but to return. She tries to escape from her feelings for Atticus. However, she just goes into the arms of another man. She tries to escape from her feelings and insecurities. The opening scene then cuts to a title card. Note how it says 3 people went missing. This is foreshadowing the end of the episode, with the 3 white supremacists breaking into Leti's home. However, they are killed by the ghosts. Pioneering is dangerous is a reference to Leti buying a home in a white area. The act of moving into a white area and integration is known as pioneering. Pioneering is described to use the upward mobility of black people who are caught between the impoverished ghettos as they are forced to live there, and white communities that treat them with disgust, intimidation and violence if they try to move. In this episode, we see Leti is ready to lay down some roots. She buys a decapitated mansion with 13 bedrooms in Chicago's extremely white north side. What could possibly go wrong, eh? Leti is obviously thrilled as she wants to turn the mansion into a boarding house and a safe place for black people, as well as make it into a renovation project. But soon after this, we see the first sign of trouble with the house when Leti is almost beheaded. Funny enough, note how Leti and Ruby both guess that the house is haunted. We then meet Hippolyta, who is quite clearly, visibly, obviously grieving for her loss of her husband George. Fun fact, Hippolyta is named after the Queen of the Amazon, a tribe of the warrior women in the ancient Greek mythology. It seems a fitting name for her as she seems like a very strong woman. I believe this is going to be explored in future episodes. Did you notice how she was ripping out the pages of the book Dracula, Uncle G's favourite book? I have a theory for this. I think this is a massive clue that Uncle G is going to return. We already know that the show uses books to represent the characters. Remember Montrose and in Monte County Cristo, and how he literally dug himself out of the jail, just like the book's main character? I also noticed him drinking and how the camera stopped to show the book. By now we know that there is no coincidences, and although the Ouija board did say George is dead, maybe he's going to be resurrected. In my opinion, this theory is further solidified when we see Hippolyta is invited into a room by what I believe is a ghost, perhaps George, and we see her looking at a sculpture of a solar system. Perhaps this room is a way for her to communicate with people in a different dimension. By this time, her mood has definitely changed. You can see a slight little smile on her face. So yeah, maybe. We'll see what happens. And actually, speaking of dimensions, we see Leti goes into the basement to fix a broken boiler, where she discovers a haunted sub-basement. I definitely believe that this is another portal. She thinks that something is trying to get her out, but I believe that there's something trying to get her in. We then see Tick goes to Leti to find somewhere to stay. She reveals that she's moving in on a Sunday, as she believes that the white neighbours will be at church. But boy, was she wrong. The neighbours turn up and give her the coldest welcome to the neighbourhood ever. They continually beep their horns, and we see how the police drive by and just allow this to happen. We hear how Ruby references Tremble Park, a Chicago housing project that became the site of racial violence when a black family moved in and was attacked with fireworks and rocks in 1963. I actually really love how this series is referencing actual real life events like history in America. I think it's really clever how they've interwoven this. Anyway, back to the story. So fast forward and we are now at the housewarming party and the beautiful sounds of the horns are still blasting. Yeah, note my sarcasm. However, the group just ignore this. They turn up the music to try and drown it out. Fair play to Leti for this. But yeah, in my opinion, I believe that the show is pointing out how many black people still have to ignore things on a day-to-day basis, and this is still prevalent in today's society. At the party, we hear gossip about Martin Luther King Jr. and his white girlfriend, who he allegedly wanted to marry, however, he was not allowed to. Did you know that this was actually true? He had a white girlfriend in college and her name was Betty. She was quoted to say that they were very much in love, and she was aware that King would be jeopardising his dream of becoming a civil rights leader if he married a white woman. I notice how Leti defends interracial romance, and I'm wondering whether she's mixed race because she's clearly visibly more lighter skinned than her sister, and she doesn't share their last name. Maybe they have different dads. And I also know that Jordan Peele's wife is white, so perhaps for him, this is a way for him to express himself. Perhaps he's relating Dr. Martin Luther King to himself, maybe. In the basement, we see how the children are playing with a Ouija board. I would never, ever, ever do that. Sorry, but I wouldn't. I'm too scared. Did you see how one of the little boys was well dressed and he asked if he enjoyed his trip down south and the board just answers no? Well, that little boy is Emmett Till. He's a 14-year-old black teenager who lived in Chicago. One day he went to visit Mississippi to see his family and was accused of whistling at a white woman. 2 white men later kidnapped him, tortured him, shot him and threw his body into the river. The white men were obviously acquitted of the murder, and that story literally gives me the shivers, just like the scene with the Ouija board. We then see Ruby singing Is You or Ain't You My Baby, setting the scene for Leti and Tick. Tick admits that he likes Leti, but we see her dancing with another man. But then the two make eye contact and you can definitely see there's a strong connection between them. Leti goes to the bathroom to cool down and then we see a freaky ghost watching her. And I'm starting to think, does this ghost represent her fears and insecurities? I think so. We then see Tick and Leti getting it on and Tick notices some blood. But Leti brushes this off and says it's her time of her month, but then she later reveals that it was her first time. The neighbours then decide to turn up their intimidation tactics by burning a cross, and we all know that this is connotated to the Ku Klux Klan. Then we see Leti, who's clearly had enough. She smashes up the cars to show that she would not be intimidated anymore. The police turn up and arrest them, completely ignoring the burning cross. It's clear to see which side the police are on. And in the police van, a policeman goes on a racial rant. He says that he never received the complaints that Leti filed. This just demonstrates how racist some police actually are. They are supposed to be there to protect all citizens. However, the black community is often at the bottom of their priorities. He interrogates her about how she managed to get the house and tells her about the 8 black bodies found in the basement. We learn that the house was built by Horatio Winthrop, and his name was actually shown in episode 2 in a portrait that Sam was showing off with Eden. Letty has now turned her basement into a dark room, and when she returns home from the police station, we can clearly see that they have been way too rough with her. Oh, and actually this reminds me of an observation I had when Letty is in the back of the police van and they're driving around making her smash all over the place. This was a reference to the rough ride tactics, a form of police brutality. The police were notoriously known for using this during the 90s, and it often resulted in injuring and paralysing black people. They even killed one black man named Freddie Gray, who died after receiving a neck injury. And of course, the police were acquitted. So back to the basement, Letty discovers that all of her photos are covered in weird scratches. She places them all together and a ghost literally came out and scared the shit out of me. Honestly, in this episode, as viewers, we are questioning whether the ghosts are haunting Letty or it is really the white supremacist, because actually to me the most terrifying thing is obviously there's the ghost, but the way that Letty's been treated in this neighbourhood. Letty lets slip that her late mother left her all of the money in her will, and Ruby is obviously frustrated and furious by this. Letty has used all of the money to pay for this new property. I think that Letty's a very selfish person, but in this episode, she's been humbled. However, we later learn that it is Christina's money. I knew she was up to no good. We can see that she's clearly the puppet master in this series. To me, this represents how the higher-ups are causing those at the bottom to fight amongst themselves. So we're seeing Leti and Ruby fighting amongst themselves and it's distracting from the bigger picture. But yeah, this is definitely a divide and conquer situation. And yeah, this was also shown with the use of Atticus being questioned by Uncle G and Leti when they were questioning his sanity because they didn't believe him about the monsters. So yeah. Leti researches the house and she learns about hiring Epstein, whose hobby was experimenting on people. There are a couple of real-life references here of real-life monsters who enjoyed human experiments. One being Joseph Mengele, a Nazi doctor at the Auschwitz camp. He experimented on several Jewish prisoners by amputating their limbs, deliberately infecting them, injecting people with chemicals just to change their eye colour. I am actually using the word experiment loosely because I would call it torture. And what's worse, he fled to Brazil and was able to live out the rest of his life. There's also the sadistics James Maron Sims, who performed surgery on black women without using anaesthetic. Yeah, you know how they feel that black women can't feel pain? I feel like he's more likely to be the inspiration for the character Epstein. Just because this episode to me is focusing on women overcoming things, so it makes sense. Where the theme was reinforced by the use of the night narration at the start of the episode. We also see Leti's transformation when she tells Atticus she can no longer take it sitting down anymore. So she's growing, she's gone from being vulnerable at the start of the episode to really taking ownership and taking control. So she wants to perform an exorcism to get rid of the ghost. As the exorcism starts, we see the three men entering the house. However, they fall victim to the ghost. Nicely done there, I think. And just when we thought the exorcism had worked, we see the ghost of Epstein possess Tick. However, they defeat him and it's all over. At the end of the episode, we see that Leti's being interviewed by a newspaper. We also see Christina turns up, where Atticus goes to meet her, where she confesses that she was actually the person who persuaded Leti to buy the Winthorpe house. Obviously, this house has a great significance in the plot because there's definitely a reason why she wants them to have the house. It was a bit annoying because as we were starting to learn about Winthorpe, Atticus pulls out a gun on Christina and obviously gets interrupted, so she stops him from shooting her. She tells Atticus she wants the pages found and he's basically being used as her pawn in her game of chess. In the next episode, we see that William is back, and I definitely believe the theory that William and Christina are the same person. We never ever see them in the same room at the same time, and also Christina's a woman, and we know from last week's episode that women are seen as a lesser value than men. So when she gets her power and she can be William full-fledged, then she will be like at the top of the game. She'll be at the top of the hierarchy. In the preview, we also see that they all go into the basement. I believe the basement might be the entry to a new portal, and that's where we saw H looking at the solar system that clearly wasn't our universe. So I think, yeah, they're going into a different portal. Speaking of H, I feel like she's going to find out the real reason Uncle G died, and I feel like that this is just going to be explosive when she finally does. So yeah, that episode was absolutely brilliant. I love how we are getting to learn more about the characters. I think Leti, the actress for Leti, is absolutely amazing. She's so convincing. She definitely deserves to win an award. So yeah, that's it for my breakdown this week. I hope you really enjoyed it. I'm sorry for bringing that out quite late. I've been a bit ill for the last couple of days, so I needed just to get better before I could do the video. But if you did enjoy it, and I hope you did, please give me a thumbs up. There's literally so much to unpick in this episode, but my video would have been way too long, and as you can imagine, it takes quite a lot of time to do these. But I might actually do a separate video just talking about the real events of Leti's house, because I think there's so many references throughout the episode, and it would be really interesting just to have a video based on that. So tune in if you want to see that.